Imagine standing inside the most expensive wedding of the year, wearing an old dress, surrounded by people who believe you don't belong. A beautiful bride points at you and orders security to remove you. Everyone laughs, until the billionaire groom suddenly stands up. His face turns pale. He looks at the woman and says, "Nobody touches her. You have no idea who she is." Then he walks toward her and reveals a secret that leaves the entire wedding speechless. The wedding was being held inside a magnificent mansion overlooking the ocean. Hundreds of wealthy guests had gathered to celebrate billionaire Daniel Whitmore and his beautiful bride, Victoria. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom, while photographers captured every glamorous moment. Nobody noticed the quiet black woman standing near the entrance. Her name was Amara Johnson, and she had arrived carrying nothing but a small, worn handbag. Amara stood quietly, watching the celebration from a distance. She wore a simple navy blue dress that was clean but clearly inexpensive compared with the designer gowns around her. Some guests glanced at her suspiciously. Others whispered. Amara ignored them. She wasn't there for attention. She had received a personal invitation from Daniel himself, but she had promised him she would never cause trouble. Victoria was speaking with several friends when her eyes suddenly landed on Amara. Her smile disappeared. She stared at the woman standing near the entrance as though she had seen something offensive. Who invited her? Victoria asked coldly. Her friends looked confused. Victoria pointed toward Amara. That woman doesn't belong here. Several guests turned around to see what had caught the bride's attention. Victoria walked directly toward Amara, surrounded by her bridesmaids. "Excuse me," she said with a fake smile, "this is a private wedding." Amara calmly replied, "I know." Victoria looked at her dress and then at her handbag. "Then perhaps you misunderstood the invitation." Amara's eyes filled with sadness, but she remained respectful. "I didn't misunderstand anything," she whispered. The conversation became uncomfortable. Guests began gathering nearby, pretending not to listen. Victoria crossed her arms. "Do you even know whose wedding this is?" she asked. Amara nodded. "Daniel's." Victoria laughed. "Then you should understand why someone dressed like you shouldn't be standing among my guests." A few people laughed nervously. Amara lowered her eyes, trying not to cry. Victoria pointed toward the ballroom doors. "Security," she called. 2 guards approached immediately. "Please escort her outside." Amara looked frightened but didn't move. One guard politely asked her to leave. Before she could answer, Victoria said loudly, "She probably came here hoping to get something." The words cut deeper than anyone realized. Amara quietly whispered, "I didn't come for money." Amara reached into her handbag and touched a folded envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Daniel. He had written it months earlier, asking her to attend his wedding. She had carried that letter everywhere because it reminded her that someone had once believed her story mattered. She could have shown it to Victoria. Instead, she chose silence. She didn't want to embarrass Daniel. Victoria noticed the envelope. "What's that?" she demanded. Amara held it tightly. "Something Daniel gave me." Victoria immediately snatched it from her hand. She opened the envelope and read the first few lines. Her expression changed for a second, but then she laughed. "This proves nothing." She tore the envelope in half and dropped it onto the floor. That was the moment Amara finally couldn't hold back her tears. She bent down and carefully collected the torn pieces. She wasn't crying because of the expensive wedding or the wealthy guests. She was crying because the letter represented someone who had trusted her. An elderly guest noticed her pain and quietly said, "Young woman, you should tell them who you are." Across the ballroom, Daniel was greeting guests when he heard a commotion. He turned toward the entrance. His smile disappeared immediately when he saw Amara standing there with tears in her eyes. Victoria was beside her, looking angry. Daniel stopped speaking. His best man noticed his expression. "Daniel, what's wrong?" Daniel didn't answer. He simply started walking toward them. The entire ballroom slowly became silent. Daniel walked past his family, past his friends, and past the photographers. He reached Amara and looked at her face. "Amara," he said softly, "what happened?" She shook her head. "Nothing, Daniel. Please don't ruin your wedding." Victoria immediately stepped forward. She shouldn't even be here. Daniel looked at his bride with disbelief. Daniel picked up the torn pieces of the letter from the floor. His hands trembled. "You tore this?" he asked Victoria. She became defensive. She was pretending to be important. Daniel stared at her. "Pretending?" Victoria nodded. "I protected our wedding." Daniel slowly looked around the room. Then he said, "You humiliated the one person who protected my life when nobody else did." Guests exchanged confused looks. Daniel turned toward Amara. "You promised me you wouldn't tell anyone unless I did it myself." Amara nodded through her tears. Daniel then faced everyone. 6 years ago, before I became the billionaire everyone knows today, I lost almost everything." His family became uncomfortable. They had never heard him speak about those years publicly. Daniel explained that 6 years earlier, his company had nearly collapsed. His father had died, his business partners abandoned him, and his bank accounts were frozen during a legal battle. He had spent months living quietly in a small apartment, trying to rebuild his life. "I was angry," he admitted. "I was ashamed. And I believed nobody cared." Then Daniel looked at Amara. "One night, I collapsed outside a train station. The room became silent. People walked past me. Some thought I was drunk. Some ignored me. But one woman stopped." Amara looked down. Daniel continued, "She had barely enough money for herself, but she bought me food, called an ambulance, and stayed beside me until morning." That Daniel's voice became emotional. "She never asked who I was. She never asked how much money I had. She didn't know I owned a company." He pointed toward Amara. "She only saw a human being in pain." Amara quietly wiped her tears. Victoria's expression began changing. The guests who had laughed earlier now looked ashamed. Daniel revealed that after recovering, he searched for Amara for months. When he finally found her, she refused his money. She only asked him to help her community center, where struggling families received food and school supplies. Daniel honored her request. Over the years, the center expanded. "That place saved hundreds of families," Daniel said. And Amara never took credit. Then Daniel said the words nobody expected. "Amara Johnson isn't a random guest. She is the founder and director of the Johnson Hope Foundation." Several guests gasped. Daniel continued, "The foundation has helped thousands of children across different countries." The room became completely silent. Victoria looked at Amara in disbelief. The woman she had called an outsider was actually someone respected around the world. That Victoria's face turned pale. She remembered seeing the foundation's name in newspapers and charity reports. She had never connected the organization with the quiet woman standing in front of her. "I didn't know," Victoria whispered. Amara looked at her and simply replied, "You didn't ask." Those 3 words were more powerful than any angry speech. Daniel looked at Victoria for a long moment. "Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life," he said. "But I cannot marry someone who believes kindness has a price." Victoria began crying. "Daniel, I made a mistake." He shook his head. "A mistake is forgetting something. You chose to humiliate someone because you thought she was beneath you." Daniel removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. The photographers stopped taking pictures. The musicians stopped playing. Guests stood frozen. Victoria's family tried to intervene, but Daniel raised his hand. "Please don't defend what happened." He turned toward Amara. "I'm sorry you had to experience this because of me." Amara replied softly, "Don't apologize for someone else's heart." Everyone expected Amara to celebrate Victoria's humiliation. Instead, she surprised them. She walked toward Victoria and said, "I know what it feels like to be judged before someone knows your story." Victoria looked at her through tears. Amara continued, "I don't want revenge. I only hope you remember this moment the next time you look at someone you think is less important than you." Daniel's mother approached Amara. For years, she had believed Daniel's success came only from his own determination. Now she understood there had been another person behind his survival. She took Amara's hands and apologized. "I should have known your name," she said. Amara smiled gently. "You don't have to know someone's name to treat them with respect." One by one, guests who had laughed earlier approached Amara. Some apologized. Others admitted they had judged her appearance without knowing anything about her. Amara accepted their apologies without bitterness. An elderly man who had defended her earlier smiled. "You didn't need a rich dress to prove your worth." Amara answered, "Worth was never something I needed to prove." Daniel stepped onto the stage. "There will be no wedding today," he announced. Everyone remained silent. Then he continued, "But there will be a celebration." He revealed that he would donate the entire wedding budget to Amara's foundation. The ballroom erupted in applause. Amara immediately shook her head, but Daniel smiled. "This isn't charity. It's gratitude." The wedding decorations remained, but the atmosphere completely changed. Instead of celebrating a marriage, the guests celebrated the people who quietly help others. Daniel invited families from Amara's foundation to join the event. Children arrived carrying small handmade cards. One little girl hugged Amara and said, "You told me I could become anything." Amara cried harder than she had all evening. Victoria quietly walked toward the exit. She had lost the wedding, but she had gained a painful lesson. Before leaving, she stopped beside Amara. "I'm sorry," she said. "I judged you because of what you wore." Amara looked at her and replied, "I hope you never make someone feel small again." Victoria nodded and walked away. Later that evening, Daniel found Amara outside on the mansion's balcony. The ocean reflected the moonlight. "You saved me once," he said, "and tonight, you reminded me why I survived." Amara smiled. "You survived because you chose to become better." Daniel looked at her with gratitude. Their relationship wasn't about money, romance, or status. It was built on something much stronger: respect. The story of the interrupted wedding spread across social media within days. People were fascinated by the billionaire who stopped his own wedding after discovering how cruelly someone had been treated. But Amara refused to become famous. She asked journalists to focus on the children her foundation supported. Daniel agreed. Together, they turned a humiliating moment into a worldwide message about human dignity. Months later, Daniel visited one of Amara's community centers. Children were studying, families were receiving meals, and volunteers were helping people rebuild their lives. Daniel smiled as he watched Amara working quietly in the background. He finally understood that wealth could buy a mansion, a wedding, and 1,000 luxuries, but it could never buy the character Amara had shown for free. Moral of the story: never judge a person by their clothes, wealth, skin color, or social position. The person you ignore today may be the person whose kindness changes your life tomorrow. True wealth is not measured by money or status. It is measured by how you treat people who have nothing to offer you.